starting a brand new series, so it is a really good time to come and to be a part. And I think we're going to learn a lot that's really going to be helpful. So even if this morning you walk in, you go, I'm not a churchgoer. This, I don't get this thing. It's not necessary for me. Today is really going to be helpful for you because it's a reality that we all deal with. Today we're going to talk about something that is really applicable to all of us, which is just finding that, that space to breathe in life. I'm going to put a picture up on the screen, and I want you to respond to it emotionally. How many of you, when you see that, you go, oh yeah, I'm good, right? And, we're all different. We all have a different tolerance for clutter in our lives, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it is. For some of you who are disciples of Marie Kondo and you are asking the question perpetually, does this bring me joy? This is not bringing you joy right now. In fact, this is going to bother you. If I were to leave this up, it would bother you for the rest of the service, right? You can't even watch Hoarders. Now, some of you could be on Hoarders, right? I know. But that's okay. I mean, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just kind of the way we are. When it comes to our garage and our trunks and closets like that, honestly, we got at least one of those where people are coming over and throw everything in that one closet. It's just different. We're just different. Some of us are more fastidious, would like more order, less clutter. Some of us are different. And it's okay in our closets and other spaces like that. The place where it's really not okay and the place where we tend to live with a lot is in our lives. When our lives look like that, when our schedules are so cram-packed and you can't squeeze another thing in there, but something in us just feels compelled to say yes to that obligation, and there are seasons of time that go by, that's not a good thing. That will take its toll on us. When our finances are so maxed out and every dollar and even some that you don't have already been spent, and you're just one extra financial burden, it's the tires that go out or your car that needs a tune-up, you're just one small thing that you did not expect away from happening to cause everything to collapse, that is not fun. How many of you are feeling me? You know it is not fun. Morally, it is not fun. It is not fun when we live our life so close to that moral line that it just takes one lapse in judgment. It just takes one bad decision. It just takes one moment of weakness, and then we're not just in a gray area. We're on the other side already. So to have our lives just cram-packed full of stuff and our schedules maxed out and our finances just stretched to the bone, that is not a fun way to live at all. It is, however, better to live with breathing room. Breathing room. Now, I think that this series is really important in the culture that we live in because in the culture that we live in, if you're a millennial, if you're, I don't even know what the ages are right now, 20 to 40 right now, you're considered the anxious generation. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. And by saying this, I don't want to minimize that. In fact, maybe for some of you, it'll be a little affirming because you felt like, man, I'm behind, or I feel like my life is squeezed and I got all these obligations. You are the first generation and the generation coming after you that has grown up with the internet and multimedia and social media. And so you get to see everybody's personal and professional lives, and you get to see the best of everybody's personal and professional lives. And so it's no wonder that if you after spending a moment or a long moment on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it might be, you don't feel great about yourself. This is a culture that is characterized by low self-esteem and incredible insecurity and anxiety. And again, I'm not trying to minimize. There are too many reasons right now to discuss why all those things are just real things. Some of you feel them, and I understand. In fact, even us talking about, breathing room, it's just causing stress. Don't worry. For the next 4 weeks, we're going to help de-stress and help do some things that will create space so that we can breathe again, because life is way better with breathing room. Life is way better when you're not just rushing to get to your next appointment so that you can get to your next appointment, so that you can actually be present with the people that you love. So much better when you can actually sit down and have a meal with your family and not be thinking about the email that you have to send or the conversation that you have to have or the thing that you have to go to next after this obligation that you obliged yourself to. When our lives are less overcommitted and we're less financially depleted, how much better would it be if you had the financial reserves, not just to bless your family, but to, when you hear something that's going on up here or something that's happening in the world, you go, you know what? I've got the financial reserves to be a part of that. There's sex trafficking in Hawaii, Is that really a thing? Is that happening? Man, what can I do to use my finances to stomp that thing out? There are homeless people. There are hungry people. There are people who've not heard the name of Jesus in other countries. And by the way, we have a missionary friend of ours here today, Henry Romero, who, local boy, grew up here, pastor and missionary in the Philippines. There he is back there. He's trying to be low-key. Henry, stand up real quick. He looks like me, right? You could have him come up and preach and you wouldn't have noticed today. He's one of our heroes in the faith. When we hear about God doing things in other countries and we go, you know what is needed is resources to make that happen. How would it be to have the space, the breathing room, the margin to be able to go, I can be a part of making a difference in another place by supporting that. Whew! That's so awesome. Life is no fun, though, when breathing room gets sucked out. And it's so much better, and we were created to live with breathing room. So today I want to talk about really practically how we can create breathing room or space in this specific area, our time. Our time and our schedules. Our time and our schedules. I'm going to get a little bit detailed, but some of it I'm going to lay to you to get detailed. Now, when we talk about breathing room for the purpose of our series, we're talking about space. We're talking about margin. We're talking about the distance between the current pace of our life and our limitations. Now look, I will admit, some of you have incredible capacity, but all of us, we all have limitations. We all have limitations financially, we all have limitations relationally, we all have limitations with our time, we all have limitations morally, we all do. And what happens oftentimes is the breathing room, the pace that we're living at, and our limitations begin to catch up to each other. Because we're living so fast, so hard. And most of it's not for bad reasons. It's good reasons. We want to be productive. We want to achieve. We want to accomplish. But when we allow that space and our pace to catch up to our limitations and that breathing room gets sucked out, gets squeezed out, bad things are going to happen. Problems are going to happen. And honestly, you're just not going to be happy. You will be anxious. We ratchet up the anxiety potential in our lives. And so what I want to do is during this series, I want to help us discover how we can create breathing room. Now, some of you, as you're hearing this, you're going, but there's just no way to do this. I mean, you don't know my life. I've got bills to pay. I've got commitments to keep. And we're running. And so you convince yourself that it's just a season. It's just a season. It's just for a short time. And you look around in culture, and everybody else seems to be living that way. They max out their credit cards. They max out their schedule. They're getting their kids from event to event to event to activity to activity. And all the important things, what they don't realize, and maybe what you didn't realize, is that the important things are not getting into your calendar, and it's being driven by the urgent things. And as we're going to see, that is the recipe for regret in life. It's to come to the end of that time when it's all squeezed out and to realize the important things didn't get done. The things that I wanted to get done most didn't get done. And the things that God wanted you to get done most didn't get done. Instead, we were driven by the urgent things. So today, as we talk about time, I want to look at a guy named Moses. Now, Moses has incredible perspective on time. And Moses wrote, of all the Psalms, there's about 150 of them, he wrote one Psalm. And he has incredible perspective on time because Moses grew up as this baby who was rescued from death. And he grows up for first 40 years of his life in the palace of Pharaoh. He's going to the private schools. He's got the elite education. He is destined to be a leader of his culture and his community. But at the age of 40, he has this awakening. And in his awakening, he realizes he's actually not one of them. He's actually one of these people who for 400 years had been slaves. And Moses identifies now with his people, and he goes, wait, those are my people. And in a moment, he rises up to help one of his people, and he ends up killing an Egyptian taskmaster. And for the next 40 years of his life, now some of you, you're 40 and you go, oh man, I'm over the hill. No. You're not. For 40 to 80, Moses now has a new job. He's a shepherd in the wilderness. And for Moses thinking, my life is done. He's like an outlaw on the run. For 40 years, he's in the wilderness. He's just tending sheep, not really doing a whole lot other than that. And at the age of 80 years old, now he's ready. And God comes to him, and God says to him, through a burning bush, God says to him, hey, I got a plan for you, and it never stopped, but now it's time to go. And so he takes him from being a shepherd in the wilderness, and he goes to be a mouthpiece for God to Pharaoh. And the instruction is, I want you to go to Pharaoh and tell him, it's time to let my people go. I'm delivering them. You go tell them. And so for the next 40 years of his life, think about this, from about, 80-ish to 120-ish, he is leading God's people, millions of them. This guy who was in Egypt, this guy who was a shepherd, this guy now is fulfilling the purpose that has always been there from God. And for 40 years of his life, he is fulfilling his purpose as a leader of a nation, a new nation of people who are no longer slaves, they're free now. He brings them to the edge of the promised land, and God says, okay, that's far enough, you did your job. Somebody else is going to lead them in. And that's it. So Moses, he knows. He knows how important our time is. He knows how important your time is. Really, your time is your life. When I was younger, I did not get this. If you're in your 20s, if you're in your teens, please listen. I know it's just going to be so hard to understand anyway. When you're younger, you feel like you've got unlimited time. You just spend. You know what happens? You cannot get your time back. It is the one commodity in this lifetime that is the most precious, most valuable asset that we have. Health is important, finances are important, family is important, but if you don't have time, none of that matters. And once you spend your time, you can't get it back. It's a perishable commodity. If you blow your money, you can make it back. If you go bankrupt, you can actually make it back. But once your time is spent, your time is spent. So that means when you're a teenager, do the things that you need to do while you're a teenager. I want to do the things that I could do as a teenager. My body won't listen. It just don't comply. So once you're a teenager, do those things. When you're 20, 30, do those things. Prepare for your future. Enjoy your 20s, 30s. Live the life that God has for you then. When you're 40, do that because you only get once. Although 40, some of you have taken 3 or 4 40s, that's okay. Most of the time, we only get once with something. When you're 50, 60, 70, God's purpose, His call, it doesn't run out on our lives. If you got breath this morning, you have breath this morning as a gift from God. Your time, my time, and this is Moses' instruction for us, our time, our life, it is a gift. You will take approximately 23,000 breaths today, just today. All those breaths, each one of them, are a gift. They are a gift from God, and that gift, it is limited. It's limited. So I'm going to read what Moses has to say, and multimedia, I'm just going to go to the main scripture points, not the broad sections. So here's what he says. This is Psalm 90. You're going to want to go back and read this. So powerful. He says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, you brought forth the whole world. And this is what he says. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. So Moses starts with a context for our lives. Without a context, without a place to put our life and our time, we have to make it up. This is why so many people are trying to find and make up significance because they don't have a context for it. And God says, no, you don't have to do that. And Moses says, you don't have to do that. Here's your context. God, who created everything, He is everlasting to everlasting. Before there was anything, there was God. After there's nothing, there is God. Time is His invention. Purpose, His purpose from everlasting to everlasting. In that, our lives fit. In that, we find significance. In that, we find purpose. In that. And so I'm going to just draw it. In that, we find a sense of hope for the days that we've been given. Without that, if you've ever wondered or asked the question, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What does it even matter? It matters because within God's plan, from beginning to end, Alpha, the Omega, beginning to end, everlasting to everlasting, He created you. And He created you with a spot on His purpose, on His timeline. So this is what it looks like. We're just... We're going to map out God being everlasting. We can't even fathom this, right? Before there was anything, Not even the materials that we make. Human beings, we look at a building and go, human made that. A human took what already existed and put that together. Before anything existed, there was no carbon, there was no H2O, there was nothing. God existed, and he created that. He's everlasting. And then after everything is gone, regardless of how you think it's going to happen, meteor smashing the earth or whatever, after that, there's God. Before and after. And in that, he blesses us with this gift of life and time. This is so amazing. He says, no, I want you to be a part of my everlasting to everlasting. But our lives only make sense within God, who is everlasting to everlasting, and his purpose, which is from everlasting to everlasting. It only makes sense. And so this is what Moses is saying, that our lives exist within a context, and it's that context that gives meaning, that gives significance to our lives. And then he goes on to say some things that aren't as great. He says this, he says, you people, you turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. And so this is what God is saying. He's not saying that we're insignificant. He's saying that the breadth of our lives, in respect to everlasting, they're brief. In respect to the beginning and the end, our existence is very brief. In other words, our time is very brief. This is not meant to be discouraging. This is meant to be a glimpse of reality that is really helpful. If I know my life is brief, that means I can't just squander my time playing Call of Duty all day long, right? That means I just can't do and work and work and work and do all the things that I want to do and ignore the things that I should do, right? I don't know, some of us, we go, well, it's been a season, I'm trying to get ahead, but that season seems to have no end, and what's languishing is your family and your marriage and your children. And God says, no, from everlasting to everlasting, you find your life. It's in that place right there, because you guys are like just this breath. He says, yet you sweep away people in the sleep of death. They are like new grass that sprouts up in the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but then by the evening it's dry and withered. Okay? There's no amount of lotion that can take care of that dry and withered. What he's actually talking about is just, again, the brevity of our lives. It's just like a snap of the fingers. And then he goes on to say, our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, yet the best of them are trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass away. They quickly fly away. So this is a portion of reality. God is speaking through Moses, the guy who's lived 120 years, almost 3 different lifetimes. And he's not saying that your lives are insignificant and it's just the dust to dust, ashes to ashes, don't even try. He's saying, no. Your lives are such a significant gift, but the reality is they're limited. And the only way that you'll find meaning is to put your life within the context of everlasting to everlasting. So this is Moses saying, if we could understand everlasting to everlasting, and we put our lives there, then our lives would have significance, our lives would have meaning, our lives would have great substance. But if we don't see that, we're going to make the mistake of unwisely spending the time that we do have on this earth. And so then he goes on here to say, if only we knew the power of your anger, your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. If only we knew. Which intimates, Moses is basically saying, we don't get it. We don't get who God really is. We don't see him for who he really is. Now, this is really important, because the more accurately we see him for who he is, the more we're able to live in a way that pleases him. And he's saying, because you don't see him for who he really is, there is no fear in our lives. We don't see God as holy, so we squander the precious gift of time that we have. Or put in a positive way, he says this, if we could see God for who he really is, we would use our time more wisely for his purposes. If we could see God as he is, we'd be way more careful with the time that you and I have been allotted. If we could see him for who he is. Now think about the way that the ancients had always talked about God. In fact, the name that they gave God, the one that's used in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament, is a 4-letter, it's called a tetragrammaton. It's Yahweh. We say Yahweh. It's actually 4 consonants that don't even have a vowel. The reason why that is because they weren't supposed to speak the name of the holy God. He was so holy. That was their view. That's why in our Bibles, many times it says the name of the Lord. They refer to the person of God in the first person as the name, because his name is so holy. It is so majestic. It is so beautiful. He is so other. He is so amazing that they wouldn't even dare say the name of Jesus or the name of God. So they use that Yahweh. Yahweh. And Isaiah, we see this when people come into contact with God and he describes who he is. That word that actually means the self-existent one. We don't even have a category for that. We have no categories for God. The one who has life within himself, the one who has breath within himself. He not only is the giver of breath, he has breath and life and self-existent. And when Isaiah came in contact with him, Isaiah said, in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord exalted and lifted up. I was no longer enamored with this king, and I began to see God for who he really is. And then there were these angels. He calls them seraphim. They're just fiery angels. And they had 6 wings, and with 2 wings they covered their face. With 2 they covered their unclean feet. They couldn't even look on God. They didn't even want to be exposed their uncleanness. And with the other 2 they flew, and night and day they cried out to one another. And they could have said anything. Could have said loving, righteous, just. They said holy, holy, holy. God, you are so other. There's nothing like you. We're so different than you. When Isaiah saw that, he said, I'm a man of unclean lips. It's just like, I know I'm going to die in the presence of the glory of God. This is so embarrassing, and I don't even want to see it. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among people who have unclean lips, and then God cleanses him. And whenever there's this contact of humanity with the holy presence of God, it's not like, hey, God, how you doing? Yeah, I'm not really pleased with how my life is going. You know what it is? It's people falling like dead people to the ground. Literally falling out. When Jesus walked the earth and they came to him and they said, are you the one who proclaims to be the Messiah? He says Yahweh, but he says it in Greek, I am. And you know what happens? They pass out. And Jesus is like, okay, these guys are supposed to arrest me. Then they wake up and they go, hey, come on, back on mission, back on task, arrest me, do what you're supposed to do. When they get just a little glimpse of the glory of God in flesh through Christ, they're out. And Moses is saying, man, if we can see God for who he really is, it would change the way that we use the moments that we've been given in this lifetime. Moses is saying, man, we would take all of our time and we would put it into the purpose of God. We'd say, God, my life is not about me. It's all about you. You are everlasting to everlasting. You are the great I am. You are the one who has breath and life within himself. This is not about what you can do for me. This is about how I can use the time and the life that I've been given to glorify, to honor you. Do you see it? This is powerful. But he says, if only we can see that. So look, I just want to give you, this is a real good practice. I would just encourage you in your life to pause regularly, often even, just to consider the brevity of your life and the glory and the majesty of God. It will bring so much perspective to everything that you do. And I don't think we do it enough. And to be real honest with you, we just live in a really busy world. I mean, we're blessed with the advances of modernization and technology, but those blessings also distract us from the things that are most important in life. And one of the best things you can do is just take a moment and consider just how short your life is and what a blessing each moment is. And then also consider just the greatness of the God who gave those moments to you. And as he goes on here, this is really great. He says this, teach us then to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. He says, man, Moses says, we need to learn this. Teach us because we don't get it. Teach us to live as if our days are limited. Now my high schoolers, middle schoolers, listen up. Teach us to number our days. College students, listen up, because I know, you know how to do this, but in this one area, oftentimes we don't do it until we get older, and then we go, oh my gosh, I spent a lot of those days, and then it becomes real. But teach us to live as if our days are numbered. Each of us have a certain allotted number of days. Nobody knows how many that is. Only God knows who that is. In the scriptures over and over, we see God shortening people's lives, extending people's lives, but the bottom line is only God knows how many days. So Moses is saying and appealing to people and to God, Lord, teach us to live as if our days are numbered. And again, this is not a depressing thing. This helps me. Knowing that my days are numbered means I cannot just cram it full of everything. Some of you, you want a piece of pastor's time, or you want me to be at an event, and I may say no. But I do that because my time with my family is really important. And if it starts to infringe on my time on my family or my time with whom I feel I need to give that to, I can't do everything or be everything, and you can't either. But we live in a culture where we're made to feel like that and guilted if we say no. And I just want to encourage you not to let that thing drive you. Moses is saying, teach us to number our days. Now, we actually do know how to do this, right? Any college students we have in here? College students, you're afraid right now. Everybody's like, oh, no. All right, college student. Okay, you know, if you have a test that is coming up in a couple of weeks, you know how to number your days, right? You know that if you have a test coming up in a couple of weeks, you prepare and you go backwards. And you map out your days because you know that on whatever date you're going to have a test. If you're a business person, business lady, businessman, you know. If you've ever done a presentation, if you've ever had to close a deal, if you've ever had an appointment for something, you know when your appointment's going to be, and so you number your days in preparation for the inevitable, right? If you're a bride, any new brides we have here? Oh, come on, I know you. Okay, brides, you know this. You know that when you set your wedding date, you know exactly to the day, to the hour, to the minute, to the second when your wedding date is, right? And before that thing happens, you know how to number your days. You know when the wedding dress has to be finally fitted. You know when the invitations have to be sent out. You know when the caterer and everything else has to be set up. We know how to number our days, but with our life, for some reason, we live as if we have unlimited time. And Moses is saying that's just foolish. You can't live as if you have unlimited time because you don't. You have limited time. So, Lord, teach us to number our days so that, and there's a reason for this, and the reason is so that we may gain wisdom. Knowing that my days are numbered helps me gain wisdom. It helps me discriminate. I can't do that. I can do that. I can't just go there. I can go there because I know that my days are numbered. So if my highest goal, I'm going to love God and be a servant of God and do everything that I know that He wants me to do in this lifetime. And I want to be a great husband to my wife, and I want to be a great father to my kids. That means that I can't say yes to things that will hinder any of those things from happening. Teach me to number my days, God, because I've only got a certain amount of time with my kids. I've got a certain amount of time with this incredible woman. I've got a certain amount of time on this earth. Teach me to number my days so that I may gain wisdom and make wise decisions. To wisely use my time. Does that make sense so far? Yeah. Okay, so we see the grandioseness of God. Our time only makes sense within the greatness of who God is and with an understanding that our time is limited. And so we're asking God to teach us to number our days so that we can gain heart of wisdom. Heart of wisdom. And so the practical outworking of numbering our days is to prioritize our days. We prioritize our days in light of the fact that our days are limited. Because we've only been given a certain amount of days, we have to prioritize our days. This guy named Paul in the New Testament kind of reiterates what Moses has said. And he says this in Ephesians 5. He says, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but wise. So he's contrasting wise behavior and foolish behavior. And he's saying, be very careful and live wisely by doing this, making the most of every opportunity, for the days are evil. That doesn't mean going to work tomorrow morning is an evil thing. That's just his way of saying the days that we're living in, they are difficult days, and the days that we live in, they are limited days. And so make the most of every opportunity. And so practically, what does that look like? That means in order for you to make the most of every opportunity, because here's the real temptation. The real temptation is to allow the urgent to push out of your life the important. is to allow things to push out of your life, your time with your family, your time for your personal health. Some of you have been so busy attending to other people, you've not taken care of your personal health. There's only so long you can do that before it catches up with you and me. Your personal health, your family, your marriage, at your workplace. We allow the urgent, and typically we allow somebody else's urgent to push out the important in our lives. And so Paul's saying, you got to be wise, and you got to be courageous. And being wise and courageous means sometimes saying no to this and yes to this. And so I'm going to give you a question that will help you be wise and courageous. Here's the question. What is the wise thing to do? What is the wise, when you think about your calendar, when you think about your relationships, when you think about your time, what is the wise thing to do for you? Right? You don't try and figure it out for me, but for you, what is the wise thing to do? So in light of your family goals, in light of your relational goals, in light of your career goals, in light of your financial goals, in light of your moral goals, what is the wise decision for you to make? What is the wise decision for you to make? That's helpful, isn't it? It's helpful. It's a helpful way for us to think. What is the wise decision for us to make? And so there are I'm going to finish now by sharing the reason why I gave this title, No Regrets, is because there's a woman named Bronnie Ware. Bronnie Ware was a palliative care nurse. And she took care of people that were on their last days of life. And in interviews with this palliative care, with dying people, it would either come up in their conversation or she would ask the question what their greatest regrets were. She actually took these results and turned them into a book called The Top 5 Regrets of Dying. Top 5 Regrets of Dying. It's not meant to be a morbid book. It's meant for us to get some wisdom so that we can make better decisions on the front end, right? If you know what somebody's regrets are and if there's a common theme to them, then we can do things to act wisely so that we don't have the same regrets. So that's what Paul's saying. Don't be foolish and ignore that. Be wise and receive that understanding. So here's what she came up with. Number 1 regret was this. Or number 2. Number 2 regret. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with hard work. No. You and I have been created to work hard. But these people had sacrificed their marriages, their families, and the things that were really most important to them for their vocations, for their careers, and for their money-making capacity. Now, the truth is that if we do it God's way, He's got a purpose for you. And He will help you and I be successful, but we put it in the right priority, it happens. If we don't, then we end up losing the things that are most important to God and most important to us. And that's exactly what she found. I wish I just hadn't worked so hard and sacrificed the things that were so important. The number 1 regret I think is really, really helpful. She said, I wish, this is the regret that many of them said, I wish I had had the courage, everybody listen to this one, this is good, to live life true to myself. Not the life that others expected of me. Wow. The other 4 were along that vein. I wish I had more courage to do what I knew I should have done, rather than to allow everybody else's expectation to drive me in this life. I would have used my time in life so differently. I think those are so helpful. Now we have a little bit more wisdom. We know how to number our days so that we can now with wisdom look at our lives, look at what we do and what we don't do, and make some better decisions about the way that we use our time. Again, 2 contexts that are really important. Number 1, the context is God, everlasting to everlasting. And the context is the fact that we all have limited time. So within the context of everlasting to everlasting, God's purpose for our life, and the fact that we have limited time, how can we best use the time that we've been given? And so I want to give you 4 things to consider, 4 things to consider. And they're mathematical equations, so those of you who hate math, you're going to hate this. No, you won't. This will be helpful. It's a plus, it's a minus, it's a greater than, and it's a less than. Plus, minus, greater than, and less than. What is the wise thing to do? What is the wise thing to do? What is it that possibly you need to add to your life? What do you need to add to your life? For some of you, you go, I really want to have a relationship with God. But if you look through your calendar, there's no room for a relationship with God. He's always the thing that you get to if you can get to it. I'll just be honest with you, you'll never get to it. If God is priority and you really want to know Him and see Him as He is, I don't make it, this is one guarantee. I guarantee you, if you and I see Him as He really is, it will change everything. And it won't cause worse life, it will cause an extremely more productive and beautiful life. But in your calendar, do you have time with God? Do you read the Bible? Do you pray? Do you worship? Now, you're here this morning, so good job. Because look, when we worship, that is entering into the presence of God and inviting God to take his rightful place on the throne of our lives. That's what happens. This is not something I have to do, or, when do they stop playing that music so I can get in there and sneak in at, 20 after? No. This is something that is vital for our existence. So maybe we need to add this, not just on Sunday, but I need to go to small group, and I need to turn on a music on my own, or I just need to pray and just sit and be still in the presence of God. I'm going to talk about this in week 4. If you're anxious, if you're stressed out, one of the things that we have lost in our culture is space, solitude. Some of us, we can't, if I told you go home and just sit quiet for 5 minutes, you couldn't do it. You'd be reaching for your phone. You'd be looking for the email. You'd be wanting to turn on the TV or something. We're just so used to it. It is. I find it in myself. My daughter reads these Little House on the Prairie books, and she wishes for a space and time like that. I love that. But we have to create it. So maybe you just need to add that to your life. Maybe for some of us, we need to take away some things. Maybe you got some relationships that are leading you in the wrong direction. Maybe you got some behaviors or practices or habits that are leading you in the wrong direction. You seem to say, enough of that already. No more of that already. Again, we can't continue to cram our life full without taking something out. It's just impossible. You and I are limited. We're just not able to do that. Maybe some of the things we just need to increase. You go, you know what? I just want to be a more generous person. You know what the key to generosity is? To give. No, I'll be generous when I get. No. The key to becoming generous and having a generous heart is to give. So we begin to give more, we begin to serve more, we begin to give our life away to something greater than us, and things change on the inside. So maybe for some of us, it's just, I need to be more regular at my small group. I just need to serve in church. I need to serve in my community. I see the need all around. I just need to serve and to be a part and to give more. And maybe for some of us, some things I need to do less. You know what? I just need to spend less time on Instagram and figuring out what everybody else is doing and freaking myself out and making myself feel like I'm so far behind in life. Millennials, come on. I'm so far behind in life. I don't have a home. I don't have retirement. All these things that we go, and God says, no. I got it. I'm everlasting to everlasting. I got a purpose for your life. I'm going to take care of you. Put your trust in me. Give me more of your time and you'll worry less. Give me less of your time and you'll worry more. So what do you need to stop doing? What do you need to start doing? What do you need to do more of? What do you need to do less of? Because we just can't keep cramming stuff into our lives. Here's what we know. We know there's a God who is everlasting to everlasting. And within who he is and his plan for history, he's given you a part, and he's given you and I this gift of years. But it's limited. So Lord, our prayer today is teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom, so that we may know how to use our time in a way that honors you and fulfills your purpose, so that at the end of this lifetime, Lord, you can say to us and we can hear from you, good job. Good job, servant. You did what I wanted you to do.